Democratic Senator Bob Casey, who has represented the Keystone State on Capitol Hill since 2006. Senator Casey, great to have you with us. How do you feel right now in terms of being patient and how you feel about Democrats in your state?
Well, like a lot of people, we're trying to be patient, but it's already been a long process. But it may take a little bit longer to get to 100% of the vote. But I think when all the votes are counted, Joe Biden will carry Pennsylvania. I think he'll carry it by somewhere near 100,000. It could be less than that, could be more. But the gap now is about 200,000. President Trump started the day ahead by 600,000. It's down to 200. And I think ultimately that will be that he'll be overtaken, and Vice President Biden will carry the state. But it is a difficult process because you're implementing a new voting system in the middle of a pandemic, and I know folks are working very hard in a lot of counties to count every vote.
Absolutely. And we knew heading into all of this that it was going to take some time to count all of Pennsylvania's ballots. But with the president now attempting to stop the counting through lawsuits, when do you expect Pennsylvania will actually be able to declare a winner?
Well, look, I think that we're going to know who has the most votes in a short time frame. The legal proceedings that will be undertaken really are determinations the court has to make. But we're going to know the winner, and we're going to make sure that every vote gets counted. I know the governor's committed to that, and state officials are, and I think county officials are. But the president's attempts to stop ballots from being counted is really an insult to the voters. It is in large measure it's a thwarting of democracy itself. Undermining the right to vote is really violative of everything we claim to stand for as Americans. And I think the president should just accept that every vote should be counted. Once every vote is counted, he can make his decision then about what he's going to do. But he should accept the will of the people, and the only way you can do that is to have every vote counted. These votes being counted today are Trump voters and Biden voters alike. So.
Senator Casey, my father's family is all from Pittsburgh, so I feel a great deal of affinity for Pennsylvania. My grandmother lived there. I'd spent a lot of time in this state. And one of the things that I think is very interesting about your state is really how very diverse it is in terms of voters in the urban centers, from Philly to Pittsburgh to all of the rural areas in between. It really is an interesting moment in America's history that seems to be playing out in your state. Nonetheless, Joe Biden says he's feeling very confident about winning the state. And I want to play some of what he had to say for our viewers.
Mm-hmm. And I feel very good about Pennsylvania. Virtually all the remaining ballots to be counted were cast by mail. And we've been winning 78% of the votes by mail in Pennsylvania.
So, two parts to my question. First of all, are these mail-in ballots, given the projections that you see, are they enough for Biden to win the state of Pennsylvania? And then the other part of my question is, will Pennsylvania continue to be a state that Democrats and Republicans fight over? How are you seeing the changing demographics in your state playing out in terms of national politics?
Well, Lena, that's a great question because the voting trends in our state have changed dramatically in just the last 25 years. It used to be that a candidate could get a big margin in Philadelphia, would lose all of the Philadelphia suburban counties, would lose parts of the middle of the state, maybe try to break even or cut into northeastern Pennsylvania. But then all of western Pennsylvania was blue territory in those days. But that pretty much ended or began to end in the 1990s, where the place in the state where the population was increasing was becoming more and more blue. So now, for example, Vice President Biden will win Philadelphia by a big margin. It could be as big a win there as President Obama. He'll do better than President Obama and Secretary Clinton in the 4 suburban counties. So that's a real head of steam coming out of the Southeast. But Western Pennsylvania is dramatically different than when I was starting out in politics. So now you win Allegheny County, which is over my left shoulder on this map. You win that county, but the counties around it are much more difficult. So what I think Vice President Biden did well is he was able to limit the deficit in a lot of rural counties where President Trump had a high vote, but maximize the vote in urban and suburban communities. So I think that combination will be a winning combination for him.
Before I let you go, Senator, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening on Capitol Hill. Democrats were really hoping to take control of the Senate this year. In fact, it seemed like Democrats felt perhaps even more confident about that heading into the election than necessarily the presidential race. But at this point, it doesn't look too likely. So what's at the top of your party's agenda in the next Congress? And do you think that there's still any possibility that Democrats are going to be able to exert more control in the Senate than they have in at least the last session of Congress?
Well, we'll see with regard to what happens in the Senate election. Some of them are still being decided. But I would have to say it's uphill for us to get the majority. And that's a source of great disappointment and frustration for me. But I think, regardless of the outcome of the Senate elections, we have certain fundamental duties, I think, ahead of us because of the grave crisis the nation faces with a raging pandemic and a jobs and economic crisis that we really have not dealt with in a fulsome manner beyond the CARES Act. So the first order of business, in my judgment, has to be in November and December passing a robust relief bill. In my judgment, it should be something very similar to what the House passed, led by Speaker Pelosi. They acted responsibly way back in May. Senate Republicans sat on their hands, did nothing on these issues for many months. And I think that has to be addressed this year, this calendar year. But then in January, with a new administration, I think it'll be a Biden administration. But regardless, I think Democrat or Republican, no matter who's controlling the United States Senate, we have to address this economic challenge. And that means, I think, passing legislation very much akin to what was passed in the 1930s in the New Deal. We need a jobs program. We need a program to deal with this economic calamity. That is going to be difficult. But we have to meet that moment, even as we're trying to confront and deal with the reality of climate change, as well as make progress on a racial reckoning in reform and police reform. We have health care battles ahead. So there's a set of problems, the likes of which very few Congresses or presidents have had to face.
Yeah, we certainly saw from the exit polls voters saying overwhelmingly that they are looking, whether they are Republicans, Democrats, or independents, for some economic relief. Senator Bob Casey, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.